This morning, I've titled my sermon as Surrendering Our Rights to God. The title of my sermon is Surrendering Our Rights to God. This is not a popular sermon. It's not a popular teaching either, but I think it's very, very important because Jesus taught this. And you find this over and over again in the scriptures that Jesus calls all of us to surrender our rights to Him. All right, so recently God just spoke to me from this passage, and it's just been brooding over my life. I thought I would share with you. Let's turn our Bibles to the book of John, the Gospel of John, chapter 12. Gospel of John, chapter 12. We will read from verse 23 onwards. Gospel of John, chapter 12, from verse 23 onwards. So I want you to carefully follow these words. These are letters in red, what Jesus has preached. So I want you to carefully follow. Let's read between the lines to understand where it's coming from, what's in the heart of Jesus when He is teaching this, when He's talking this to His disciples. Okay, Jesus replied, verse 23, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. I tell you the truth, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. The man who loves his life will lose it, while the man who loses his life, who hates his life in this world, will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor the ones who serve me. Now my heart is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. No! It was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name." I'm going to read verse 24 again. "I tell you the truth, unless a grain of wheat, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds." There's a spiritual truth why Jesus is saying this here. Unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. It becomes fruitful. There's a great harvest. There's a multiplication. There's a great blessing if a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies. The people, the audience who were listening to this were farmers, were people who work on the field every day. It's basically an agrarian community. So they very easily understood what Jesus was saying. But for us, probably, I have to throw a little bit of light what it actually means. I'm sure most of us would have, read this in our schools, the germination of seeds. How does a seed germinate? So that's what Jesus is actually talking about. So you plant a seed in a moist soil, and then the seed coat breaks. The outer covering of the seed breaks. And once the outer covering of the seed breaks, there's a tiny root that comes out of that seed, and it goes downwards. Okay? And from that same seed, there's a tiny shoot that grows upwards. I'm sure you know the difference between a root and a shoot. A root is something that goes downwards and forms the root system. And a shoot is what goes upwards, which comes out of the surface, and where you see the plant and you see the fruit, you see the beautiful, flowers. All right, so it's the same seed. It's the same seed, but when it breaks, when it cracks, when it dies, a tiny root that goes down and forms the root system. And then there is this tiny shoot that comes out of the surface, and there it forms into, it bears fruit, becomes a flower, and there are many seeds in it, and it multiplies. It becomes, it's a great harvest. There is a lot of produce. So So this is the whole process that's involved. But the first thing that happens to that seed is when it's planted in that moist soil, the seed breaks, the seed cracks. The outer shell of the seed has to break open. So that's the most important part. And that's the spiritual truth that Jesus is telling here. He's saying a seed must die. A seed must die in order to produce fruit. That's what he's saying. A seed must die in order to become fruitful, in order to be a blessing, right? So it's not a very pleasant thing, right? If a seed could talk, the seed would probably say it's not easy to be buried inside a dark, cold earth, and then you go through a process, and then you break open. Those days we had this. Today we have instant photographs. The moment you click, you will know how you look. But in those days we had to wait, because we have those negatives which has to go into those dark rooms, and it is developed. Keep it exposed to the sunlight, and then you see your beautiful picture. After many days, probably we had to wait for at least a week to see how we looked. It all goes into those dark room, right? So it's not a very pleasant thing, right? But that's what Jesus says. But it has to go there, and if it doesn't go there, it won't achieve its goal. So Jesus said, unless a kernel of wheat, unless a kernel of seed falls to the ground and breaks, it cannot produce much fruit. If it just remains single, it's of no use. So we are all like that seed. God's children are like that seed, right? We are small, insignificant, but we have God's life in it. There's God's life encapsulated inside it, right? So this God's life has to manifest. It shouldn't stay inside. It should manifest, right? If it gets trapped inside, then it's of no use. So God wants His power, His glory, His life to manifest out of you. It has to break open. Sometimes we feel that lot of blessings, all the blessings that you need, you're looking for in your lives are there inside. It's there within you. It's there in you. You feel like it's all there, but it's just that it's all trapped inside. It's not just coming out. You're very confident that God has a plan for you. We're very confident that God has spoken so many things in your life. You're very sure that God has promised you so many things. But you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and you don't see that manifest in your life. It's all there. God has promised all of this. It's part of your life. You're carrying it. You believe it's for you, but it's just all trapped inside. It's an unbreakable shell. It's not just coming out because, there is no breaking off, right? When I started my ministry, early stages of my ministry, I loved preaching. I used to love preaching. But there's one point in time when I started to preach, I was preaching, and every sermon after I would come back, very grieved in my heart. I would come back. There was a heaviness in my heart. I know that something was missing. I knew that the sermon was still trapped inside. I just couldn't find my release. I just couldn't feel that God has taken that word and it has gone into the hearts of the people. I couldn't feel it. But I would have preached. Every week I would come back after preaching the sermon. What is wrong with me? Why is that? I just still feel there's something inside. It's not come out. And then I began to pray and pray and pray. And God said, yourself is an obstruction for my spirit to flow through. So I began to sit and think about. I begin to sit and think, what are the things? I begin to question my motives. Why am I preaching? What is the reason I'm preaching? Am I preaching to impress people? Why is that I'm coming up with all these thoughts? Am I trying to woo people, trying to tell them something they have not heard? I begin to sit and work on all of those things. And then I understood it's myself that's obstructing God's Spirit to just come through. Every sermon I would come back home so grieved. Why is this? There's a huge block here. It's all trapped inside. It's so true. It's so true. Sometimes your blessings are all trapped inside and you're not able to find that release. It's all in. Because the truth is, it has to break open. Your life has to break. You got to die. I told you it's not a popular sermon. You got to die. That's what Jesus is saying. You got to surrender your life. Because only then you will become fruitful. Only then you will become a blessing. Only then there's going to be a multiplication. There's going to be expansion in your lives. Unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, breaks open, splits, it remains a single seed. It It remains a single seed. So what is Jesus saying here? Jesus is saying here, yourself becomes a big hindrance for your blessing. Yourself becomes a big hindrance for your blessing. Unless you surrender yourself to God, unless you give up your rights, unless you give up your priorities, unless you give up your desires, and tell God, Lord, you have your way in me. I'm willing to do anything you want me to do. When yourself dies and God's Spirit takes over your life, that's when you become a blessing. That's what Jesus is saying here. That's what Jesus is saying here. Right? So you must break and die. That's what it means. You must give up. You must surrender. You must relinquish. Yourself should be gone. Because when that happens, your blessing flows into your life. Your blessing flows into your life. Right? So if you read this passage, you see Jesus is bringing that contrast. Do you want to remain a single seed, isolated, lonely, barren, unfruitful? Do you want to remain a single seed all your life, just trapped inside, but it's not come out? God's blessings is not flow. Do you want to remain a single seed, or do you want to be fruitful? That's the contrast. You see, that's what he's saying here. Do you want to remain a single seed? Let's now keep reading. Then verse 25, the man who loves his life will lose it. The man who loses his life will keep it. Do you want to love your life? Is your life so important for you? Is it all about you? Is it all about yourself? Is it all about your priorities, your plans, your desire? You want to do it all your way? Is it your way or God's way? Did you see the contrast? That's what he's saying here. The man who loves his life will lose it. At the end of it, you're going to lose it all. If you're going to keep your life, you don't hold it too close. With a clenched fist, it's got to slip through your fingers. A man who loves his life, going to pursue his life, will lose it. But the man who's willing to give it up for Jesus, the man who's going to let go and allow God to take over his life, man, he will keep it. He will keep it. Martin Luther said, all that I held in my hands, I lost it. But what I was able to place in God's hands, I still possess. You place it in God's hands. You leave it to God. And you still keep it. That's the contrast that Jesus is telling here. Whoever serves me must follow me. My Father will honor. Do you want to serve God or you want to serve yourself? That's the question. That's the contrast here. If you serve me, I will make you honorable. I will honor. I will give you honor. That's what God is saying. So can you see? So do you want to live for yourself or you want to live for my glory? I want to live for my glory. I will make sure that I will bless you. That's what God is saying here. You can see, so the question here Jesus is asking, are you willing to surrender your life? Are you willing to surrender, give up your rights? Are you willing to die to yourself? Are you willing to put this self to death, which is obstructing God's blessings to flow out of your life? Do you want to be fruitful? Do you want to be a blessing? Do you want God to expand your life? That's the principle. That's the spiritual truth that we learn here. Unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains single. So do you want to remain single, isolated, lonely, barren, unfruitful, or you want to be blessed? It's not an easy choice, isn't it? It wasn't easy for Jesus either. It wasn't easy for Jesus either. But it's a genuine struggle. It's a genuine agony. Let's read it. It wasn't easy for Jesus either. See, we just read these verses and now in verse 27, now my heart is troubled. What shall I say? Why is his heart troubled? You can see the tension here. Now my heart is troubled and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. Can you see the tension that Jesus is going? It's very easy to preach. It's very easy to preach. And Jesus is going through the same struggle. He said it. This is a sweeping statement. He's told us. He's preached to us. He said this is how it's going to be. Unless you give up yourself, unless you're willing to die, unless you're willing to surrender your life to God, you will not be a blessing. Your life is not going to be fruitful. But having said that, he's saying, oh man, what can I say? My heart is troubled. Because Jesus was fully aware of God's plan in his life. He knew where his life has come to now. He knew where it's all culminating. What's this point now in his life, right? He's fully aware. He's fully aware of God's plan, what he must do. So if you just skim through John chapter 12, that's why you have to have your Bibles, just skim through John chapter 12. You will get an idea of what's there in that passage. Jesus predicts his death, right? And then if you see John chapter 12, Jesus is anointed at Bethany, prepared for the burial. Some woman come and anoints her. And Jesus says, she's anointed me. She's preparing me for my death. And then, Jesus enters into Jerusalem riding on a donkey. And then he predicts his death. So Jesus was pretty much aware. He was fully aware that his time has come, that he's going to give his life. And this is the reason why he has come. He's fully aware of God's plan. But when the rubber meets the road, when the pedal hits the metal, when it comes to the crunch, we call it whatever. When it comes to your point of obedience, that's when there is a tension, there's a challenge. I tell you, there's going to be a challenge in all your lives. All your life, there is going to be a challenge for you to make that deliberate choice. Deliberate choice what Jesus did. He said, Father, save me. I don't want to do this. Save me from this hour. I just want to do it my way. I don't want this. It's too much of a sacrifice. I don't want to go this way. This is not my priority. This is not how I want to deal with this. And then he said, no, it was for this very reason I have come. So Father, glorify your name. Can you see there are two prayers there? There's a conflict there. There's a conflict there. There's a conflict. It's a genuine conflict. It's a genuine struggle. It's a genuine tension. You all will go through in your lives. Take my words for it. You will all go through in your life. There's a genuine tension. It says one side is saying, do I have to really do this? Do I have to really do this? I can have my way. I can do it differently. Or this is not important that I need to do it like this. Or it's too much. This is too much. This is too much of an asking. Right? Really, God really demands all these things? Should I have to really give my life 100% to God? Jesus had the tension. Do I have to do this? Can't you save me from this hour, Lord? Can't you save me from this hour? This is his prayer. Father, save me from this hour. And then he realized, man, no. What can I say? For this is the reason I've come. Father, glorify your name. Do what you want to do in my life. I'm willing to lay myself. Jesus said, Lord, Father, do what you want to do in my life. I'm willing to I'm willing to surrender my rights. I'm willing to surrender my privileges. I'm willing to surrender my life to you. I'm willing to give up everything. Lord, only use me for your glory. Use me for your glory. I tell you, all your life you're going to make that choice. All your life. When the rubber meets the road, when it comes to the crunch, you will have to make that decision. It's 100% obedience to God. That's what it calls for. You will have to make it. Oh, you might say, it's okay. I can still manage. It doesn't have to. This is too much demanding. Right? I could still do it my way. I would still have my priorities. Or you would say, no, Lord, use me for your glory. I'm willing to do anything for you. To the extent I'm willing to give my life to you. 100%. No reserves, no regrets. Use me for your glory. Father, glorify your name. I tell you, it's a very genuine tension. It's a very genuine agony all of us will have in life. I've had that many times in my life. Would you believe there was a time I walked up to my mentor and said, I don't want to do church ministry. I don't want to be a pastor. That's the last thing that I had in my mind. I walked up to my mentor and said, for a couple of reasons. One is, it's a thankless job, because, you preach and you do it, it's week after week, and sometimes it's also boring. I see the same faces week after week, and then sometimes you do so much of good for your people, and then, you're always misunderstood, Sometimes and they talk behind your back. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking in general for pastors. It's the plight of the pastors, okay? And then they fabricate stories about you, some things that you have not said, some things that you have not done. There's so many stories have been cooked up about me, right? So that's one reason. So it's just it's just thankless job. So another reason why I said I don't want to be a pastor is because I tasted success early in my life. I tasted success very early in ministry. So, right, a couple of years down the line, I started traveling abroad. I had an exposure to travel abroad. And the first time I preached in UK, in one of the churches, as soon as I finished my sermon, a couple of people kept running to me. And there's one person with a camera. I said, brother, stand. I want to take a photo. We want to capture, and we want to put this in our website. We want the sermon to be up there. We want everybody to hear the sermon. And then people just came, and they gave me offerings. It's all in pounds. When I received all of that, came back, man, I get so much of respect outside my church. And they pay me in pounds. Wow, this is exciting. This is why I want to do ministry. And people said, you must come back. And then they said, you know what? They said, we have been praying, for God to send somebody for our youth retreat. And I think God has spoken that you are the one. We're going to invite you again in August. And I said, wow, this is amazing. This is how I like ministry to be. Go from place to place, and in people, there's so much of gifts galore, people, man, I was so excited about it. I tasted early success in ministry. So I said, this sounds good. Who wants to be always in the same church week after week, come and preach to the same people over and over again, right? But you know what I tell you? God broke me. In fact, even my mentor was willing to release me. I said, I had a dream that I'm wearing a new suit. So this is not something new God is giving me. I don't want to be pastor in a church. I don't want to be restricted to this one place. I thought I had the ability, I had the charm, I had the giftings to make it big. Doesn't have to be in a church. You know what? It's a genuine tension. And God has to break me. And guess what? 21 years, I'm still being a pastor. I never went back to UK after that. 17 years later, now I have an invitation. This year I have an invitation to go to UK. I'm still praying about it. After 17 years. It's a genuine tension. It's very hard to make that choice. It's very hard to make that choice. Say, Lord, I want to give up my desires, my ambitions, my priorities, my plans. I want to give it up all so that you can use me for your glory. Father, glorify your name. This is the reason why you have chosen me. This is the reason why you have called me. I will give my 100%. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be very hard. But there's a conflict, right? Philippians chapter 2, verse 5 and 6. Now I'm telling you, this is going to be there for each and every one of you. It's because Jesus had to go through this. If Jesus had to go through this, we will all have to go through this. And we will all experience the same tension, the same agony, the same struggle that Jesus went through. If Jesus had to go through, you and I will not be spared. And Jesus went through this. Philippians chapter 2, verse 5 and 6. Being in the very nature of God, he did not consider it equality with God something to be grasped. He never said, I'm equal with God. Jesus never said, I'm equal with God. I hold this position in the Godhead, second in Godhead. Why should I have to give up everything and go down and walk among my people and live among them and give my life for them? He never said that. He never thought this is equality to be grasped with, but made himself of nothing. He just emptied himself. He just gave himself completely. He made himself of nothing. Imagine God of the heaven and the earth giving up all his glory and just walking the dusty roads of Nazareth. Charles comments so beautifully, Jesus gave up everything in his life that he had. He possessed nothing, right? He was born in another man's manger. He slept in another man's boat. He rode another man's donkey, and he was buried in another man's tomb. He never had anything for himself. That's what it says. He made himself of nothing. It's a choice that Jesus has to make. It's a choice that he has to make. And you know what? It's a clarion call for all his followers to say. He says, if you want to really be blessed, if you want you to be your life to be a blessing to you and to others, if you want to be fruitful in life, unless the seed falls to the ground and dies, unless you break, my life will not flow out of you. That's what Jesus is saying. You see how important it is for us to pray that prayer, what Jesus prayed. Father, glorify your name. Father, use me for your glory. It doesn't matter. Use me for your glory. Jim Elliot made a beautiful prayer. Jim Elliot was a missionary to Ecuador, to the jungles of Ecuador, one of the most dangerous tribes, the Bodoni tribes. I've read his book, Missionary to Ecuador. And he committed his life to go as a missionary. And because it was a very dangerous engagement, he very confidently felt that, God is calling him for a life of celibacy. So he prayed, he committed himself never to get married because he thought that God is calling him to a very dangerous place, a place where a family life is not suitable. So he writes in his journal. He had a habit of writing journals. He wrote in his journals every time, how he wants to pour out his life for God and all of that. And then he meets Elizabeth Howard, a beautiful girl in Wheaton College. Right. And then you find all of a sudden his journals are filled with Elizabeth Elliot. His journals are filled with her, And then he begins, and then there's a tension. It's a genuine tension. Now God is calling him to live a life of celibacy, to go as a missionary to the jungles of Ecuador. And there he meets this beautiful girl and he's fallen in love with her. And then he writes in his journal, let's read this prayer. Father, let me lose my clutch on everything temporal. My life, my reputation, my possessions, my love. Lord, let me lose the tension of the grasping hand. Open my hand to receive the nail of Calvary as Christ was opened. He thought heaven, equality with God, not a thing to be clutched at. So let me release my grasp. What a beautiful prayer. Lord, let me lose the tension of the grasping hand. Have you prayed that? Let me lose the tension of the grasping hand. What are the things that you're holding on in your life today? What are the things that you're holding on? You're holding on very tightly. You think it legitimately belongs to you. You think you have your right to own it. You think it's your right to have it. So many things that we hold on to life. When it comes to the point of obedience, sometimes God gives it. God gives it, legitimately gives it to you, and He tests. It's a point of obedience. He will test you and ask you whether you're willing to give it away. That's what happens to Abraham. Just correct me if I'm wrong. That's what happened to Abraham. This is a promised seed, waited for 24 years, and finally Isaac is born. And then when Isaac is born, he says, everything is just sorted out, and God comes up and says, I want you to take Isaac, your firstborn, the only one, the one you love, go offer him as a sacrifice to me. I mean, nonsensical, doesn't make sense. Lord, you gave it to me. I can do whatever I want. Would you surrender your rights on your son? It happens all the time with God. It happens all the time with God. So you can't simply say, right? I was just preaching to my pastors last week. We were in the annual conference. I was telling them, it's a point of obedience where God brings you to test how your heart is. Are you willing to obey, be faithful? Sometimes God gives you a ministry. I was telling them, sometimes God gives you a ministry that's bound to fail. Your ministry will be a failure, and God would have given it to you just to test your heart, how faithful you have been in doing a ministry that is bound to fail. God can do that. Reinhard Bonnke, for the first 7 years of his life, he served in a place called Lesotho for 7 years. Absolutely no fruit. It was a failure. But that was there in Lesotho. God gave him a vision. Blood-washed Africa. For the first 7 years, no fruit. God will give you something that will fail. And He'll test your heart to see how faithful you are. It's a point of obedience. It's a place where God brings you and finds you, whether you're willing to give up. Lose the tension of the grasping hand. So, if you want to do God's will in your life, if you want to be fruitful, if you want to be blessed, if you want to be a blessing to others, you got to die to yourself. You got to give up. You got to give up your ideas. You got to give up your priorities. You got to give up your preferences. You got to give up your... Why do you give up? Because God has the best for you. Why do you give up? This is a wise exchange that you're making, and a glorious trade-off that's happening. Because for us, our minds are so small. We think what we know is the best. What we have is the best. What we see is the final. But that's not how God works. God works with your life to bring you to a place of total surrender. And then He takes away all of that and then gives you the best for you to experience. Experience that God can use you for His glory. I don't know how many of you will be ready to pray that prayer by the end of this sermon. Lord, Father, glorify your name through my life. Jesus resolved that tension. He had that tension, but He resolved it. He resolved it. He said, save me from this. Is there a way that I can escape? Is there a way? Is there another way to do it? I don't want to do it. But then He realized, man, no. This is the reason I've come. My life belongs to my Father. So here, Father, glorify. Do whatever you want to do in my life. Here am I, 100%. Do whatever you want to do in my life. Use me for your glory. I don't know how many of you will have the nerves of steel, so to speak, to pray that prayer and say, Lord, have your way in me. I'm willing to do anything for you. I'm willing to die. I'm willing to give up my priorities. Jesus said, let's turn to Luke chapter 14. Let's turn to Luke chapter 14, verse 35. Luke chapter 14, verse 35. 33. Luke chapter 14, verse 33. In the same way, any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. Am I reading it right? In the same way, any of you who does not give up? Okay, a little bit louder, please. Everything he has. Does not give up everything he has. Cannot be my disciple. The first question is it, most of us would tend to ask is it for everyone? Is it mandatory for every one of us? Sometimes some of the verses we conveniently skip. I think it's not for me. Sometimes some of the messages also we conveniently skip. It's not for me. It's for somebody else. This verse, it's for pastor. It's not for me. Because pastor, he's a servant of God. He has to give up everything. Only then he can be a disciple. For me, no, for us, God has His own rest. God relaxes on so many things of our lives. So I think it's not for us. How many of you think that way? How many of you think these are verses that's meant only for full-time servants of God, for pastors, for missionaries, for people who have left everything and gone. So God expects more from them. With us, it's okay. God understands. We cannot do all of this. It's not for us. You think the first question, let me answer. Is it for everyone? Is it mandatory act of surrender? Surrendering our rights to God. Is it mandatory for everyone? Let me answer that question, right? Who's Jesus speaking to? Who's Jesus speaking to? Turn to verse 25. What does it say? Large crowds were traveling with Jesus and turning to them. Who's He turning to? Every one of them. All those large crowds that were following Jesus. These are not just selected few disciples that Jesus called and said, unless you give up everything that you have, you cannot. It's not just for selected few. Jesus is turning to those large crowds and He's telling them, every one of them. So, are we all called to give up everything that we have? According to the literal text, yes. Are we all called to preach the gospel? Or only few of them were called? Yes. Are we all called to be witnesses for Jesus wherever we are? Yes. All of us. That's why Paul said, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. Necessity is, God doesn't, you don't have somebody to come and lay their hands on your head and say, you know what, my son, I want you to preach the gospel in your workplace. No, you're called. That's a calling upon every one of us are called. Every one of us are called. William Booth was the founder of Salvation Army, right? powerfully used by God. They call themselves soldiers of God. They consider themselves to be an army, right? That's why they had ranks. They wore uniforms. If you have seen Salvation Army members, you'll see they'll wear a uniform. They'll call themselves soldiers. There were ranks. There were titles. William Booth called himself General Booth. He said, we are all an army for God. We are not just believers. We are an army for God. We are waging a warfare against the spiritual forces. We are fighting, and we are fighting against sin, social justice. We are fighting for God's kingdom. So that's what he said. So one day he preached a very powerful sermon, and at the end of the sermon was about the call of God. So at the end of the sermon, somebody walked up to him. A young man walked up to him and said, William Booth, I heard your sermon. You spoke about the call of God. But he said, but I don't have a call. And William Booth looked at him and said, what did you say? Did you say I don't have a call? Or did you say I have not heard the call? And then he said this. I'll read it to you. Then he looked at that young man and he said, put your ear down to the Bible. Hear the voice of God. Put your ear down to the hearts of the people. Hear their cry for help. Go stand in the gates of hell. Hear the voices of the thousands of them who are heading towards eternal destruction. Then look at the face of Jesus. You will know that you have a call. It's just that you have not heard the call. Do we all have a call? You are not convinced. Are we all called to preach the gospel? Yes. Are we all called to be a witness for Jesus? Are we all followers and disciples of Jesus? By the way, there are no two categories. No believers, disciples category. Okay? The Bible never talks about that. More than 200 times the Bible only tells disciples. All of us are called to be disciples, right? Are we all called to give up everything? What is everything, Pastor? That's what troubles me. Isn't it? That's the question, right? What is this everything? From the beginning you are saying everything, everything. What is that everything? How can I give up everything and survive in this life? How can I give up, my job? How can I give up my legitimate needs? What does everything means? Give up your rights on everything. You see? Give up because you understand nothing belongs to you. Nothing belongs to you. Everything has been given to you by grace. Nothing belongs to you. Never a point in time you think that you own. You are not owner. You don't own anything in this life. So what God wants from us is that He gives us everything, but He wants us to relinquish our rights on everything. You don't have your right on your job, on your finances, on your possessions, on your children. You don't have rights on your children. I don't have right. I've given up my right on Evie a couple of years back because I had no control over her life. God had to bring her out of the jaws of death to give her back to me. To give her back to me. Do you think I have rights over her life? No, I don't have. I don't have right over my children. You don't have right over anything in life. And you understand and give that up. That's all. That's all matters. And God says, when you do that, which means you're coming, God can step into your life any point of time and say, my son, my daughter, I want you to do this. It's a point of obedience. And there is a slight tension that will happen. And then you'll say, no. Father, use me for your glory. Here I am. There will always be a tension. There will be a genuine tension. But very soon you will resolve that and come to a place and says, no. For this is the reason you have called me. Father, do what you want to do in my life. Here am I. Use me for your glory. Use me for your glory. Right. There's a beautiful book, Pursuit of God. Maybe you should read that. A.W. Tozer talks about the blessedness of having everything and possessing nothing. The blessedness of having everything and possessing nothing. Now, what is Jesus talking here? We'll finish close. We'll close quickly. Now, what Jesus is talking here, he's giving you an example. Now, this whole passage starts from verse 25. We read Luke chapter 14, starting from verse 25. It goes all the way down. And then finally, he encapsulates. He captures the theme in verse 33. I just read that to you. In the same way, any of you who does not give up everything he has. He just comes back to that. But there is a storyline. There's something that Jesus is teaching here. Right? So, let's read this. Verse 28. Suppose one of you want to build a tower. Will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? For if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees will ridicule him. Now listen to this. Saying this fellow began to build and was not able to finish it. Look at this verse. For if he lays a foundation and is unable to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule. Jesus is talking about ridicule. At some point of time in life, all of us have been ridiculed for our faith. You would have, you must have, right? All of us have been ridiculed for our faith. Because the moment you accept Jesus, people will begin to think something has, you've gone bonkers. You know, what has happened to you all of a sudden? You know, something's changed. You're not the same. If you had secular friends, worldly friends, you're working in a secular environment, people begin to notice. They must notice. They must notice, right? They begin to see. It happened to me. It happened to me when I accepted Jesus as my personal savior, and I began to prioritize my life, and people thought, what's wrong with you? What's happening to you? Yeah. So all that happens to us. If it doesn't happen to you, if people don't ridicule you for your faith, then maybe somewhere you're compromising on your faith. You're probably trying to just play it safe because you don't want to look, this odd man out. You don't want people to think that something is wrong with you. Just doesn't have the spirit of this age. Yes, what's so different? You're spiritual. Become a spiritual nut. What's gone wrong with you? So you want to play it safe. No. It's a glorious representation of who you are in Christ when people begin to ridicule you for your faith. Embrace that joyfully. If people ridicule you, it doesn't matter. Sometimes you lose your friends. It's okay. It's okay. So, we all will be ridiculed at some point of time. We have faced ridicule, mockery because of your faith, because of your decisions. Even coming to church on a Sunday morning, people will make a mockery out of that, right? But here is another ridicule. It's a very different ridicule Jesus is talking about. That first ridicule is very good. It's a good ridicule. You should be ridiculed for your faith. But this is another ridicule. What is this? Jesus is saying, if you want to build a tower and then you lay the foundation and you're not able to finish it, everyone will see it, will ridicule you. He's talking about your spiritual life, and he's saying, you have started your journey as a Christian, and then you have laid the foundation and you want to build it. But if you're not able to complete the race, if you're not able to finish, then you will be ridiculed. One of the dangerous propositions of Christianity is not everybody who started well finished strong. Do you know that? One of the dangerous propositions of Christianity. Not everybody who started well ended well. It's there in the Bible. It's there in the history. Right? So it's not just about starting well. God is saying the final grand structure of that beautiful building, the final grand structure of God's beautiful plan for your life should be complete. You should be there to see it. It should not be left halfway. You see, you understand what I'm saying? What Jesus is saying? It's not just about laying the foundation. It's not about, just imagine somebody says they're going to build a house and a foundation is laid and then prayer is made and then there is a lot of celebration happens and the beautiful layout, architectural, blueprint, design, everything is set and then it's just there lying there for 15 years. If you go to Scotland, there's something like that. A beautiful structure that was built right in the heart of the city and it is left like that. It's not completed. It's called the Folly of Edinburgh. I've seen it. It's called the Folly of Edinburgh because the government ran out of funds to complete it. Today it's right there, heart of the city. When you walk into Edinburgh, when you go to the city of Scotland, you will see that right there. It's a folly. It's an object of mockery. They started, but they couldn't finish it. Jesus is saying, man, I've got a beautiful plan for your life. It's a beautiful structure. I want you to see that. The grand final structure of God's plan for your life. Not just the foundation. We all have a good foundation. You all have a good foundation. God is saying, if you don't see that, become an object of ridicule and mockery. The dangerous proposition of Christianity is that not all those who started strong ended strong. You know what? So, last week I was in Istanbul, Turkey, and one of the iconic structures of Turkey is Hagia Sophia, which stands for 1,000 years. And the paradoxical thing about that is, it was once a church. You can see that it was once a church. That's Hagia Sophia. You can see the minarets on the sides. That was not initially there. When it became a mosque, when the Ottomans took over the city and they captured the church, the largest church in Christendom, then they constructed those minarets and made it into a mosque. And if you see inside, it's stunning. It's just breathtaking. You can see those frescoes, those mosaics of the early, Byzantine times. You know what? Close to 60% of the New Testament, the letters that's written, the ministry that's done, it all is there in Turkey. Do you know that? All the 7 churches in the book of Revelation, it's all in Turkey. Do you know that? The Isle of Patmos, where John was there, imprisoned, it was in Turkey. A lot of things. Church of, Colossians is in Turkey. Laodicea is in Turkey. Ephesus is in Turkey. Everything is in Turkey. So much of rich Christian history, all wiped off. It's not there anymore. When you go into the Hagia Sophia and you see all those beautiful, walls, you see all of that. And the picture onto my left, which probably onto your right? So can you see a small gathering there? A lot of people right there. That's the place where the kings were anointed, the emperors, the coronation of the emperors took place. The Roman Empire became a Christian empire. Do you know that? Constantine, the Roman emperor, made Christianity as a state religion. Imagine a sect called Christianity, which was started by just Jesus and his 12 disciples from the provincial backwaters of Palestine, conquered Rome. In 300 AD, Rome became a Christian empire. Constantine, all the Roman emperors were anointed. There's a place where they worshipped God. And today when you see all those calligraphy, the Islamic calligraphy, all those put up, it's become a mosque. How can a pagan king, how can a pagan religion conquer Christianity? There's no trace. There's 0.2% of Christians in Turkey now. The dangerous proposition of Christianity. Started well, never ended well. Go to the next slide, I'll show you. This is a very unique place. That is Hagia Sophia. Hagia is holy. Sophia is wisdom. This is Hagia Irene. Hagia is holy. Irene is peace. Both are 2 churches. This is one of the first church. Can you see that? This is the place where all the bishops sat and created the Nicene Creed. You know the Nicene Creed? All of you from your old Anglican churches, every Sunday you will recite that Nicene Creed. The Arian heresy said Jesus was not divine fully. So all the bishops came together and sat there. Those are those very benches where they sat together and they created the Nicene Creed, which the church had to confess every Sunday when they came. You know what has become to this church? The Ottomans, the Muslims took over and they made it as a place to store up their weapons, arms. Dangerous proposition, right? Is that all? That's all? Okay, fine. So what is Jesus saying here? Jesus is saying a very simple thing. The whole passage is again talking about, it all boils down to this. I close with this. In the same way, now listen to this. In the same way, any one of you who does not give up. You know where your blessing lies in life? Where you can experience, you begin to see the grand structure of God's plan being completed in your life. God has got a beautiful plan for your life. It's not just about laying the foundation. It's not about laying the foundation. God is building it brick by brick in your life. And He's saying that if you don't give up if you don't give up your life and surrender yourself to Jesus, you can never see it. That's what God is saying. So the beautiful promise that we have, the beautiful promise, what God is saying is like, if you really want to be blessed and fruitful, that's the key. That's the theme of this message. If you want to really be blessed, if you want to really be fruitful in your life, God is saying, break that self. Destroy that self. Put yourself to death. Let yourself die. So that God's blessings can flow out of your life. How can, it's mind-boggling, right? How can Christianity be lost in a place like that? How can we lose Christianity in a place there's so much of... Paul was born in Tarsus. It's in Turkey. Paul. How can a place with such rich Christian history, so much of missionary work, so much has gone. But today, it's a Muslim country. I'll tell you, when Christian standards are lowered, Christianity loses its power. It's not about people going to idol worship. It's not about people stopped coming to church. You know, they were all coming to church. Church was there. They kept worshiping. They kept preaching. People still claim to be Christians. Christianity was still legally a religion of the state. It was still there. It was still there. But when Christian standards are lowered, Christianity loses its power. So Jackie Pullen just said this, and I agree with it with all my heart. She said, my prayer for the churches is that we will voluntarily choose death. I repeat it. She said, my prayer for the church is that today's church will voluntarily choose death to lay down their lives for Jesus. Because you know what Jesus said in John chapter 10 verse 28? This is what he said. He said, my Father loves me because I lay down my life and I lay it down voluntarily. I have the authority to lay it down and I have the authority to take it back. And she said, one of the reasons why we are not able to experience this blessing in life is because we have our predefined boundaries. I'm just going to close with this. We have our predefined boundaries. You know what it is? You decide what you need in life for you to exist. That's your predefined. You already decided. You decide what you need in life for you to exist. You know what? I decide that I need this much of money. This is how much I need for me to exist in life. Therefore, I have to work. I have to strive. I have to sweat it out. Because only if I have this much money, I can exist. I decide I need to have this much of comfort in my life for me to exist. You see, you have predefined boundaries for your life. I decide I want to have these people in my life so that my life can be happy. Only these people can make my life happy. So I decide who I want to be part of my life. I decide how much I want to love people. I decide how much I can accommodate people into my private life. I decide how much of time off I need when I'm so stressed. I decide how much of time I need to sleep for me to survive. You see, everything is decided by you. Jackie Pullen just says, but I agree with that. Everything is decided by you. I decide. But he says, the problem is that it's not about what you decide, that what you need to exist in life. You have to realize that your Father in heaven knows what you need. It's not you. Remember Jesus said, look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap and gather into barns. Doesn't not your heavenly Father feed them? Look at the ravens. Look at the lilies of the valleys. See how beautifully they are clothed. Even Solomon in all his splendor is not arrayed like one of these. Today they are there, tomorrow they are gone. But see how your heavenly Father clothes them. And then he says, will not your heavenly Father knows what you need? That's the problem. That's the problem. We all think there is all predefined boundaries in our life. You have already decided what you want to do in life, right? But what Jesus says is that, you know what, you decide and understand and trust that your Heavenly Father knows what you need. And you begin to trust Him. And when He gives you the best. He gives you the best. He gives you the best. That's the most important truth. So when we decide what we want in life, and when we think that this is all that we need for us to survive, I tell you what, you forfeit the grace that comes from God. You forfeit the grace that comes from God. Because you have set your predefined boundaries, your preconceived notions, your defined ideas, and this is the way you want to live. You forfeit the grace that flows into your life. What's important is that you begin to realize and understand, my Heavenly Father knows what I need. What I need. So unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains single. But if you want to be really blessed, if you want really God's blessings to flow out of your lives, you have to come to a place and say, Father, do whatever you want to do in my life. Here I am. I give up my priorities, I give up my preferences, I give up my plans, I give up my desires, I give up my rights, I give up my life. Lord, use me for your glory. And God gives the best for you. God knows what you actually need. God knows what you actually need. Right? I tell you, I've put God to test in this. It's not that you're not going to be at the losing end. I worked so hard from December. I know my wife might know. From December, it's been a very, very tight schedule. We had Christmas, New Year, and then January 1st, we had our prayer harvesters, and then I came for a prayer, and then we came back. I went to MP for the church inauguration. We came back, and then planning for the harvesters annual conference. It's back to back. I just didn't have a break. Just 3 months, December, January, February. And God knows that I need a break. And the best part is that somebody pays for your air ticket, somebody pays for your accommodation, somebody pays for your food, somebody is paying for everything, and you just enjoy the best of it. Doesn't it sound good? Don't you want that? Doesn't it sound exciting? Because you allow God to decide for you. Because God says, the Father knows what you need. And when you give up your rights, I'm sure we all need vacation. God created vacation for us, right? God created vacation for us, right? But you know what people say? I'm so stressed. I need to have a time off. And people who get a time off and come back are more stressed. The reason is because you're not facing your challenges. You face your challenge. You face what life throws at you. And that's when you feel God is able to raise you up to the next level. Right? I've put God to test. I want to tell you, right? When you give up your rights, surrender your rights to God. Have you noticed my wardrobe has gone for an upgrade? Have you noticed? I know some of you have come and asked me. You've been very curious. What has happened, Pastor? Nowadays, I don't know what. I just get a lot of gifts. You know what I'll tell you? At the very beginning of my ministry, I decided, I said I'll give up my right on my personal needs. I made a decision with God. Even today, it's very hard for me, my wife to make me buy something. You can ask her. It's very hard. It's very, very hard. She has to force me to buy something. Because I would always say, I don't have to buy because God gives. God will take care of me. Because this is one area, I'm a little embarrassed to say this because I'm saying it, but I hope you understand the spirit behind it, okay? I'm saying it because I've put God to test and it's worked. I said, I don't want to buy anything. My food, my clothing, my shelter, my needs, my vacation, everything God will take care of. Because I want to give up my rights on that. Right? So I don't buy anything. It just comes. You can wear Armani Exchange, but a pastor is not supposed to wear. They will all, where does he get the money from? A pastor wears Armani Exchange. Pastor wears Birkenstock. Maybe he's become a prosperity preacher. He just comes, what to do? Somebody came and gave me a suitcase from UK. Pastor Nana brought a suitcase full of clothes. 4 shirts, Marks and Spencer's, 2 trousers, 2 shoes. Then Ajit came and he gave me, and then it just keeps coming and coming and coming. The best part is that you don't have to spend any money on that. So what I'm trying to tell you, I hope you get my point. But I want to tell you this, my heart is not in this. My heart is not in this. I'm just thankful to God. I'm very grateful to God for what He does for me. And it just makes me feel more and more obligated to surrender my life to God for His faithfulness, but my heart is not in this. My heart is not in this. I can very truly and humbly say, put God to test in this. You will see. When you give your life to God, when you surrender your life to God, when you give up your priorities to God, you want God to bless you, you want God to flex your mind. Just don't be fixed, rigid. Don't just have a fixed opinion. Allow God to expand, stretch your mind. Allow God to change you. Be that new wineskin where God can make you flexible, change you. Tell God, Lord, here I am. Here I am. Do whatever you want to do in my life and use me for your glory. Use me for your glory. Don't mistake me. I just spoke from my heart, okay? I just spoke from my heart. And I just still do it. I still come back to the place and say, Lord, I still have the tension. It's not that I've arrived. I still have that tension. It's a very genuine tension. But every time I come back to that place and say, Lord, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Lord. Do whatever you want to do in my life. Father, glorify your name. Lord, use me for your glory. Can you do that today? Do you want to do that today? Do you want to tell Jesus? He's very careful when you speak words to Him. He very carefully listens what you say. And He will hold you to your words. If you don't want, you can take your time. Just that I preached so hard for 1 hour. And, but it's okay. But let's just rise up to our feet and just take a moment and pause. Would you allow God to touch those sensitive areas of your life, those desires of your life? It could be a legitimate desire. As I said, it could be something that God said He's going to do it, but God would say, what if I don't do it? Just imagine. What if God says, yeah, I give it to you, give it back to me? How would you respond to it? Every time when God walks into your life, every time He walks into your life and He tells, my son, my daughter, will you do it for me now? And your answer should be, Lord, yes, here I am. Use me for your glory. I'm willing to surrender my rights. I tell you, when you do that, God is saying, you will become fruitful. There's a blessing. When you break that self, when that outer shell breaks, when you surrender your life to God, when you give yourself 100% to Him, that's when you become a blessing. You become fruitful. Every area of your life, you will see the hand of God. Can we just pray?